Hey guys, Keir from Kegland, and today we're talking about jockey boxes or magic boxes, also known as cooler boxes. These are a great way for you guys to cool down beer if you're in an off-grid scenario, don't need any power whatsoever. Fantastic for tailgating, let's say weddings or functions or parties where you want to set up a satellite bar somewhere or something like that. Let's say you just need to pump through a heap of beer in a short amount of time because you don't need to cool down the kegs themselves. So essentially those kegs are sitting at ambient temperature. That warm beer can come through one of these boxes and cool in the lines as they're traveling through the cooler box, and then cold beer comes out the other side, or not just beer, it could be cold brew coffee, kombucha, cider or something like that as well. But they make a fantastic option for those types of functions because often when you're going through lots and lots of beer, you don't have a massive cool room where you can store 30, 40 kegs or something like that. But with these types of boxes, as long as you've got a source of ice, which you can just keep topping up in here, then you basically can keep pouring beers. So, essentially there's no limit on, how many you can put through this unit effectively. So with these two units here, we've got this one which has been on the website for a while. This is our Rotomolded design. Look, if you want something which you want to take camping, for instance, I would probably say this one's slightly superior. The insulation in our Rotomolded Eskies is really top notch. So if you put, fill this thing up with ice, you'll easily be able to get over a week and still have ice left in the Esky. So you can, be pouring beers literally a week later after filling this thing to the brim, and you will still be pouring beers. This one has slightly less insulation. It's thinner. Both of them have polyurethane foam-filled walls, so they're not like the cheaper styrofoam ones. So both of them do have pretty good insulation, but this one here is not quite as good. Obviously, it's got a nice look to it with the stainless steel. And the cooling coils in here operate in a slightly different way to the cold plate, which is in this one. So I'm going to go into a bit of detail on, which application is best for, which type of function or usage, and also, how to basically, set these up and use them to get the best results. Anyway, so let's get stuck into it. Now with both of these setups, you have to have some way to basically get the liquid from the keg or vessel of some sort into the jockey box. One of the most common ways of doing that is just using a gas cylinder. So if you're using CO2, that's a fantastic gas to use because it's fundamentally one of the cheapest gases that you can buy in a gas cylinder. You can also use things like nitrogen or Ceramix if you want to get a little bit more technical, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on. But essentially what you've got is an inert gas pushing a liquid out of a keg, and then as you can see, that's sort of going in here, and then the liquid essentially is pushed out of the keg, and then I've got a quick ball lock disconnect which I can just clip onto the back of the jockey box like that. So I've got my warm beverage which is coming out of here, going to the back of the jockey box, and that's it. Now of course, if you guys were doing a non-carbonated beverage, there's no real need to actually use a keg itself. You could also use a pump, for instance, if you've got a non-carbonated beverage. Something like our Super Sucker would work absolutely fine. And you could basically push, or suck out of like a bladder, for instance, and then basically push that liquid out of the bladder into the back of the jockey box. So let's say you got white wine or something like that. That would be the perfect way to do it, and you could avoid the need for using any inert gas. Now with this stainless steel one, let me show you inside of the jockey box, because inside the rotomolded white one that we have, and then this stainless steel looking jockey box use different ways of using the heat exchange. Inside this one here, you can see what we've got is these 4 cooling coils. Now the only way that we've been able to fit 4 large coils in here is by making a new coil type, which is a rectangular type of coil, and nesting them in each other. So we've got basically 2 pairs of coils next to each other, and as you can see, they fit quite snugly in there. The other thing we've done, which I really kind of appreciate, and this was done based on feedback we got from our customers, is making sure when we use coils, we have some way of retaining them in there. So as you can see, we've got this stainless steel folded up bit at the back, and that basically holds these coils down, because there's nothing more frustrating than you get to the end of the day and you want to drain this out or empty all the ice out, and you tip it upside down, and then the coils basically fall out over the ground, and they rip your beer lines out and cause a leak next time you use it. So that's really kind of frustrating. So we thought, let's solve that. Let's put some folded stainless steel brackets in here. So on the front, you can see these tabs here are holding those coils, and the back holding them at the back as well. Now, when you're using this type of jockey box, it is extremely important to make sure that the ice is covering the coil. So you need to fill this up pretty much right to this sort of, it's about 25 centimeters. So you're going to need to get a few bags of ice, fill it up here. And this type of jockey box, you really want to have an ice and water slurry, because these work quite different to the cold plates, which I'm going to show you in a tick. And that ice and water slurry essentially gives you the best heat exchange. Because if you just had ice in here, you're going to end up with a lot of little air cavities and bits of the coil which are not actually touching the ice itself. So that's how it works. And generally what you'll find is the first bit of warm beer will start to melt. So if you've got a beer line like this and ice sitting around here, you'll end up with that ice melting and it forms this sort of hollow cavity. So no ice is actually in contact, with the coil itself. So that's something you just have to sort of keep aware of. Now, when you get these jockey boxes off the website, they come with 5/8 shanks at the back like this. So essentially, there's just threaded bits. Now, there's lots of different options with the 5/8 threads on the website, what you can buy to attach to it. Look, in my opinion, I think you're best off going with the ball lock disconnect, so you can essentially quick disconnect the beer line directly onto the back, as I was saying before. So this piece here, that's our 5/8 liquid ball lock post. So I would buy those ones and then put them all on the back here, and then I would make up a bunch of these jumper cables. So I've got basically the ball lock disconnectors, and they just basically hook up like that on the back of the esky. So if you need to disconnect it, you got that. And then, you can just basically get these beer lines and chuck them inside the esky when you're storing it for later. Of course, you can use, which is a bit cheaper, these duo-type fittings. And then what you can do is actually just get the beer line and essentially push the beer line directly into the fitting here. But, then the beer line's kind of tethered to the machine. I suppose you can unscrew this after every use. They are slightly cheaper, but, that's another way you can go. They do stick out also slightly further because you've got to make sure you've got a little bit of a bending radius on here. So if you're pushing this sort of hard up against something else, you'll find these might be just a little bit lower profile, especially using our low profile duo-type ball lock disconnects. So that is how to set up the plumbing. So with these rotomolded eskies, not only is the insulation superior to the other, jockey boxes, one of the benefits of using the cold plates is really these cold plates are superior at sucking heat out of the liquid as it passes through here. So if you're on a very high capacity unit, so let's say you've got, a grand final party and there's a 15-minute or quarter time period or something like that, or half time period, and you just have to pump out a huge number of beers in a short amount of time, these cold plates are the best way to go because you'll be able to get higher throughput. Like with the coils, you'll have to give it a short, moment, few seconds, 10 seconds break between pints or something like that for it to cover. But with the cold plates, you can pretty much just be pouring continuously because they can suck the heat out of the beverage really effectively with that large aluminium heatsink essentially sitting at the bottom of the cooler. The other way I want to also mention how these are different is the way that you, basically use the ice in this system. So with the cold plates, the ice has to be in contact with this cold plate itself. So you don't want to have an ice water slurry like the other unit. So with this type of unit, you should always have, when you're dispensing, this little, valve on the bottom of the esky open. So what you got is the water is draining off. And what happens in that type of situation is as the ice melts, the water's draining away, so the ice is basically falling down and it's always in contact with the aluminium heat sink. That's how you're gonna get the maximum heat exchange with this type of unit. And obviously, if you don't do that, what's gonna end up happening is the ice will float to the top, there'll be no ice in contact with the cold plate, and then you'll end up with this situation where you've got usually like a thin layer of water, kind of stratifying levels in here, and that warm water will just get hotter and hotter and it won't effectively suck the heat out of the beverage. So it's just important to remember that. With coils, you have to have an ice water slurry. With cold plates, you have to have ice in contact with the cold plate directly. Now, when it comes to all of these types of systems where you've got the keg sitting at ambient temperature, it's important to remember you have to set the pressure depending on what temperature that keg is, and this is the case especially if you're using CO2 as your dispense gas. So in this case, I've got this CO2 gas cylinder, for instance, right here, and when I'm setting this up to work on this system, the best, if you're not very familiar with this type of stuff, is to refer to one of these charts. Now, these charts are really inexpensive. I've got one of these stickers and I've basically stuck that onto the inside lid of the esky. And what you can do is look at the dispense pressure that you need to set to ensure that that beer is essentially not going to go flat. But at the same time, I don't want to use too much pressure because if I use too much pressure, then the beer or the beverage is going to become overcarbonated, and you don't really want either to happen. So really, in the best case scenario, look at this chart and you actually can refer to it. So most draft beers are sort of round about that 2.4 carbonation level. So if you look at this column here, you can follow down 2.4, and then let's say I've got a beer which is sitting in the keg at 20 degrees Celsius. So that means at 2.4 volumes of carbonation, my dispense pressure really should be somewhere in the range of about 28.4 psi. So 28.4 psi at that temperature would be the perfect temperature to keep that in solution. Now, one of the difficult things with these types of setup, especially if you've got it connected over a long period of time, is you can, if you have the gas set too high, you can start to slightly over-carbonate the beverage, and if you have it too low, it'll sort of gradually lose carbonation and become flat. Now, if you're dispensing a keg over a very short period of time, let's say over a few hours, or let's say just one day, probably the over-carbonation issue and under-carbonation issue is not a massive problem from the perspective of changing the the volumes of carbonation which are actually in that product. However, one thing I should mention is if the carbonation or if the pressures are too low, you will notice one problem and you start to get bubbles inside the lines. And what I mean by that is, let's say I've got like, as I said, it was 28 PSI, which it should be set at. Let's say I had like only 20 PSI. What you'll notice is you'll start to get these bubbles in the lines like that, and they cause a lot of foaming at the tap. So if you've got foaming at the tap, the first thing I would do is look at the lines and go, oh, jeepers, am I set at the right pressure? And if you've got bubbles in the lines, generally you need to increase the pressure to basically, prevent the beer. Essentially that beer is bubbling in the lines, it's boiling. So, you need to increase the pressure to prevent that boiling from happening in the lines. Now, the other thing I should say, and this is a massive rookie mistake when a lot of people get these types of setups, is they use the pressure at the regulator to adjust the flow speed at the tap. And this is a massive mistake, because a lot of people go, oh, well, what I'll do is if it's coming out of the tap too fast, I'll just crank the pressure down, and you can't do that. So as I was saying before, the pressure has to be set based on, what the temperature of the keg at, not what speed you want at the tap. So because you can't use this as a means to increase or decrease tap flow speed, I would highly recommend on this type of setup to get some type of flow control mechanism. So either get the flow control taps like this, where I've got a lever on the side and I can adjust the flow speed at the tap, or we've also got flow control ball lock disconnect. So if you've got a keg coupler or a keg like this with ball lock disconnects right on here, get the flow control ball lock disconnect where you can adjust the flow with the knob on the top there. And that way, you can crank the pressure up if you need to, but then you can also use the lever here to slow the flow of the liquid down. Ideally, what you want to be achieving is a flow rate out of the tap. All these sort of full-size taps with a 10 mil orifice nozzle, you're sort of trying to aim for around about sort of 300, 400, 250 to 400 mils per 10 seconds is kind of like in that range. So if you're somewhere like there, you can measure it with the stopwatch, then that's the way to go. The other thing I would highly recommend is also having a thermometer with you. So if you guys are using one of these setups and you're getting any foam, the first thing I'd do is pull out your trusty old, thermometer. Now these are really inexpensive, but they're absolutely one of the best tools, the first tools you should ever reach for if you're trying to troubleshoot, getting foamy beer. Because the other thing is, if it's coming through the coil or through the system too fast, the liquid is not going to have enough time, in contact with the ice or that heat exchange liquid, so it's not going to cool down fast enough. So you may need to also slow the flow down, so it's got a little bit, more contact time with the ice or the ice water mixture. So you make sure the beverage is coming out of the tap at a reasonable temperature. So typically most draft systems, they're going to pour really well and quite fast. If you've got the temperature around about sort of 2 degrees Celsius. However, if the temperature starts to climb to 4, 5, or 6 even, you're going to start to get a lot of foaming issues. Now, both of those things will feel cold, so it's not just good enough to just taste it, because you'll probably think, oh, it's cold to me, but those few degrees difference make a massive difference to how much foam you're going to get, and therefore wasted beer. So it's really, really handy. Have a thermometer with you. Now with the NukaTap options here, you've got a lot of different options with respect to handles and the taps themselves. As I was saying, look, the flow control taps are probably, the better option for this type of setup. So you can adjust the flow rate depending on what the keg temperature and keg pressures are sitting at. You can also get the, NukaTap SS taps with the black coating if you want that sort of, ninja type of look, I suppose. Or if you're moving this jockey box around a lot, you don't want these handles to get caught on stuff, you can go for these shorter, ball type handles as well. Look, personally, if you're running a function and it's a self-serve type of bar, I would highly recommend getting these types of taps where you can put essentially like a little printout. You can put the label of the beer, in behind this lens, or these also come with a blackboard or whiteboard type of option where you can just write on there with a whiteboard marker. So if you quickly change the kegs over, you can just, tell customers what's on which tap that way. The other thing I should say is a good idea to have a drip tray of some sort. Of course, you could just hang this off the edge. Let's say you're outside somewhere and it drips onto the grass or something. But if you don't want to do that, then get a drip tray. This is the 50cm drip tray, and it's kind of perfectly sized for this type of jockey box, or even this one that works pretty well. So yeah, we've got a bunch of different drip trays. There's ones you can also bolt to the front of the esky. So if you've got ones where you want to basically lift the esky up and the drip tray goes with it, you may want to consider one of those. Essentially, you just have to put some screw holes in here, and then the esky will hook on and go into the front like that. So they're called our wall-mounted drip trays. So you can have a look at some of those as well if you think that's a better option for you. Now, if neither of these kit options suit you, the other option is you can get one of these eskies and then modify it yourself. We now have these jockey boxes available separately with no holes drilled in the front, so you can buy one of these and put your own number of taps in there and fit it out. It's really not that difficult to build these. I'd recommend buying our step drill bit. I think our step drill bits are even cheaper than most hardware stores, so really good value, only a few dollars. Basically, drill out those holes in this stainless steel here, put the beer taps in, and also put some taps on the back. May also be the case if you've got, like, let's say, a unique condition. Maybe you've got a jockey box you want to set up and you're really only using it amongst a few friends camping, for instance. Maybe you can actually get away with the NukaTap Minis. The NukaTap Minis are a smaller, more compact tap. I should also say they have extremely low thermal mass. They pour hardly any foam at all, so they have the lowest amount of wastage when you're you're pouring beer, because they pour with the least amount of foam. So like NukaTap Minis, if you want to make your own one of those, you can buy your own esky, drill them into the front yourself, and you'll be done. Really, it's only like a 20-minute job to fit up one of these eskies and drill some holes in it so you can make your own type of jockey box. Or if you guys want us to see us make kits like that, put it in the comments below. Say, guys, I'd love to see, like, a NukaTap Mini. If we get enough comments in there, we'll surely make it for you. So, if you've got a specific request like that, or making a compact esky, or you want to see something specially made up, just let us know. We do respond and listen to our customers. Anyway, that's it. Of course, if you want to hear about any of the other cool stuff that's coming up, bottom right-hand corner, hit subscribe now. Make sure to hit that bell icon so that way you get notified when a new video drops. The other thing is you can sign up to our Facebook Homebrew community group. We've got an active group with thousands of guys sharing tips and tricks on how to use the gear. So go on Facebook, search Kegland Homebrew community group, and be part of the discussion too. All right, that's it, and see you guys next time. Bye.